The trade district of Vorn Station looked calm from a distance, but up close it felt wrong. Too clean, too bright, too quiet in all the places where noise should have lived. Every wall glowed silver, polished until it reflected the crowds like a warped mirror. Vents hummed with stale air. Neon banners flickered above metal walkways, repeating ads in cold mechanical voices. Jalen Arik stood at the entrance of Lane 9, coat collar raised against the artificial wind blowing from the cooling fans. His wrist scanner projected rows of numbers in pale blue light. He was sent here to check illegal activity, fake IDs, suspicious trade logs, and anything that smelled like exploitation. It was routine work, repetitive and empty, the kind of job that made a man feel like a machine. He was ready to move on when something caught his eye. A stall farther down the lane, too quiet, too empty, too wrong. Two alien women sat behind a transparent barrier. A large yellow hologram above them flashed the words, "Paired lot, final clearance." In front of the stall stood the vendor, a bulky alien with a shining vest and a forced smile. He shouted loudly, even though no one seemed interested. "Buy one, get one free. Take both. Cheap labor, no trouble." A few passers-by chuckled. Others didn't even look. The two women kept their heads lowered. They looked like they had been sitting there for hours, maybe days. Jalen's steps slowed. He felt something twist inside his chest. Not pity, not shock. Something older. Something he had trained himself to bury. The older woman had pale violet skin, dulled with exhaustion. Her long dark hair was tied in a simple knot, strands falling over her bruised shoulders. She sat straight, forcing dignity into a place that offered none. Beside her, the younger girl hugged her legs close, her clothes ripped and faded. She trembled each time the vendor shouted, but she never looked up. Jalen stopped in front of the stall. The vendor's grin wavered for a moment. "Looking to buy, sir? You take one, you must take both. They're a pair. Good workers, no complaints, no noise, no problems." Jalen ignored the sales pitch and focused on the women. He noticed the signs, thin wrists, tired eyes, controlled breathing, the silent fear that came from being treated like property. His jaw tightened. "Why are they paired?" he asked. The vendor hesitated, then shrugged. "No one wants them separate. They might be sisters, or maybe just from the same shipment. Doesn't matter. Buy one and get the other free. A deal." Jalen said nothing. He didn't look like a customer. He looked like someone measuring a crime. The vendor's eyes narrowed. You from the registry?" Jalen didn't answer. His hand hovered near the ID badge clipped to his coat. The vendor's voice softened instantly. "Look, I just follow the rules. This is legal. All papers clean. You want them or not?" Jalen met his gaze with steady, unblinking eyes. "Release them," he said quietly. The vendor blinked. "You're buying?" "Yes." There was no emotion in his voice, but the vendor hurried to unlock the system. Within seconds, the barrier hissed open, and the noise of the market seemed to fade. The older woman stood slowly. The younger remained still until her sister touched her shoulder. They approached Jalen with careful steps, unsure if this was another trick. "Follow me," Jalen said. No promises, no explanations, just a simple order meant to keep them moving. They walked together into the glowing corridors of Vorn Station. Three strangers crossing a line none of them could ever step back from. The corridor outside the vendor stall was crowded, but somehow the noise felt distant, like the world had lowered its volume the moment the three of them walked away together. Jalen kept his pace steady, eyes forward, hands in his coat pockets. He was trained to walk with purpose even when he had none. Behind him, the two alien women followed with hesitant, almost silent steps. The older one stayed close, alert, her gaze scanning every corner. She walked like someone who had learned the hard way that danger often came from behind. The younger girl stayed a step farther back, clutching the torn fabric of her clothes, flinching each time a loud voice echoed through the metal halls. They drew attention, but Jalen didn't break stride. The upper levels of Vorn Station were built like a maze, tunnels lit with harsh white lights, pipes running across ceilings like exposed ribs, railings humming from stabilizer power. Jalen led them through a narrow walkway where fewer people passed. Finally, the younger girl whispered, her voice thin with fear. Where are we going?" Jalen didn't turn. Away from the trade zone. The older woman narrowed her eyes. "That is not an answer. It's the only one you need right now," he replied. She didn't like it. He could feel her suspicion like weight pressing against his back. But she still followed. That meant something. When they reached a lift platform, Jalen pressed the call button. The doors opened with a tired hiss, and the three stepped inside. The walls were mirrored, reflecting their faces in cold, unforgiving light. The young girl avoided her own reflection. The older one stared directly into it, jaw tight. Jalen watched them through the glass. "You have names?" he asked. The older woman answered first. "Tira." She placed a protective hand on the younger girl's shoulder. "And she is Nira." Nira kept her head down, but nodded slowly. Jalen gave a short nod back. "Jalen Arik." Neither woman reacted to his name. That was good. If they knew who he was within the registry, they might have run. The lift began rising, humming as it carried them away from the market's noise. For a moment, the world felt small, just the three of them suspended in a metal box. Tira finally spoke again, her voice low, edged with challenge. "You work for the people who put us in those stalls." Jalen didn't deny it. "I work for the system. Doesn't mean I follow all of it." She studied him with guarded eyes. "Why take us?" He stared at the lift doors, watching the floor numbers blink upward. "Because no one else would," he said. It wasn't the full truth. Not yet, but enough for now. When the lift stopped, they stepped into a dim hallway, far quieter than the markets below. The floor vibrated softly with the pulse of machinery beneath the station. Old pipes dripped condensation. Light panels flickered. Nira shivered from the cold metal air. "This way," Jalen said, guiding them toward a door marked with faint peeling numbers, Unit 5B. He keyed in the access code. The lock clicked, and the door slid open with a slow scrape. Inside was a small apartment, plain, worn, but warm. A narrow kitchen, a couch near a fogged window, a cot in the corner, and shelves filled with old tools and stacked ration cans. Nothing expensive, nothing suspicious, just lived in. Tira hesitated at the doorway. "Why bring us here?" "Because it's safe," Jalen replied. She didn't move. He stepped aside, letting them choose. Nira slipped inside first, small steps, eyes wide as she took in the room. She touched the edge of the couch, like she wasn't sure it was real. Tira followed more slowly. She stood in the center of the room, shoulders stiff, studying everything. The exits, the corners, the shadows. Jalen closed the door behind them. The sound echoed like the final piece of a decision falling into place. "You can sit," he said. Neither woman did. He understood. People who had been treated like objects did not easily believe safety. So he walked to the kitchen, turned on a small stovetop burner, and began heating water. "You hungry?" he asked. There was a long silence. Then Nira whispered, almost afraid of the answer. "Yes." Tira didn't speak, but her eyes softened, just a fraction. Jalen set a pot on the burner. It wasn't trust, but it was a beginning. The water on the stove began to simmer, filling the small apartment with a gentle warmth. Jalen moved with quiet precision, pulling out a sealed packet of grain mix and a small tin of preserved meat. He didn't look at the two women, but he could feel their eyes on him, watching every movement, weighing every intention. Tira stayed near the door, her back straight, arms folded as if holding herself together. Nira stood beside the couch, fingers rubbing anxiously at the frayed threads of her sleeve. They looked like they wanted to relax, but didn't remember how. Jalen poured the grain mixture into the pot, stirring slowly. "You can sit," he said again. Nira sat immediately, almost flinching when the cushions dipped under her weight. Tira remained standing. He expected that. She was testing him, guarding both herself and her sister. When the food was ready, Jalen filled 2 bowls and set them on the small table. The steam rose in soft curls. Nira leaned forward, inhaling the smell with wide, hopeful eyes. Tira looked from the food to Jalen, suspicion still sharp. "You're not eating?" she asked. "I will," he said, "after you two start." She hesitated, stuck between fear and hunger. Nira didn't wait. She took a cautious sip, then another, then began eating faster. Tira let out a slow breath, sat down at last, and took her first bite. Her shoulders loosened almost instantly. The exhaustion she had been holding back began to show in her posture. Jalen stepped away, sitting on the floor beside the wall, giving them space, giving them control. For the first time since he'd found them, the apartment felt like it belonged to more than one person. When they finished, Nira leaned back on the couch, hands wrapped around the now empty bowl. Tira wiped her lips with her sleeve and looked at Jalen. Why are you alone here? She asked. Jalen shrugged slightly. It's easier that way. Easier for what? Work. Silence. Thinking. Tira studied him. And rescuing strangers from a trade stall? He didn't answer immediately. His eyes drifted to the fogged window where rain streaks slid down like silver threads. I don't rescue people, he said quietly. I just stop things from getting worse. That's the same thing, Nira whispered. He didn't reply. A moment passed before Tira spoke again. What happens now? Jalen stood and moved to the small shelf where folded blankets were stacked. He tossed one to Tira and another to Nira. Now you rest, he said. Tomorrow I deal with your registry files. Tira frowned. Deal with? You mean hide us? Temporarily, he said. If I process it right, no one will even know you're missing. Nira's voice trembled. If someone finds us, will they take us back? Jalen's tone hardened slightly. No one is taking you anywhere. It wasn't loud, but something in his voice made the room still. Tira slowly lowered herself onto the couch. She kept Nira close, wrapping the blanket around both of them. Nira leaned into her sister's side, eyelids heavy, breathing slowing. Jalen dimmed the room's single overhead light. Shadows stretched across the walls, soft and harmless. You can sleep, he said. Tira nodded once, but didn't close her eyes. She watched him as he moved to the floor again, rolling up a spare cloth to use as a pillow. He lay down with his boots still on, hands resting on his chest. Why there? Nira asked softly. It's the only place that keeps you both comfortable, he replied. Tira whispered. Aren't you afraid we'll steal something? He gave a faint smile. There's nothing here worth stealing. Silence settled again. Not the cold kind from the market. This one was warm, slow, almost gentle. Outside, the rain softened. The city below hummed like a distant heartbeat. Nira's breathing grew steady. Tira's gaze finally drifted away from Jalen and toward the window. Her eyelids lowered. For the first time in a long while, she looked less like someone waiting for danger and more like someone trying to remember what safety felt like. As the night deepened, Jalen kept his eyes open, listening to the quiet rhythm of the room. He wasn't used to sharing his space, yet somehow the presence of the two women didn't feel like intrusion. It felt like responsibility, a weight he didn't resent. And for reasons he couldn't yet explain, he knew this was only the beginning. Jalen woke before any alarm. His eyes opened to the faint blue glow leaking through the window panels. The city's lower engines hummed softly beneath the floor, steady, rhythmic, familiar. He pushed himself up slowly, stretching the stiffness out of his neck. Across the room, Tira was already awake. She sat on the edge of the couch, elbows resting on her knees, staring at the fogged window, as if trying to look beyond it. Nira was still asleep beside her, curled tightly in the blanket, fingers gripping the edge even in rest. You don't sleep much, Jalen said quietly. Tira didn't turn. Not indoors. Not anymore. Jalen stood and moved toward the kitchen counter. He filled the kettle with water and set it on the small stove. The heating coil clicked once, then began its soft hiss. Tira's voice broke the silence again. Is it always this quiet up here? When the pumps behave, he replied. When they don't, everything shakes. She finally looked at him. Her eyes weren't angry this morning, just cautious, sharp, searching. You work for the registry, she said. People move out of your way when you walk. That's the code, he said. Not me. You enforce their laws. The same laws that put us behind that barrier. Jalen didn't flinch. He opened a small jar, scooped dark powdered brew into a metal filter, and set it over a cup. Steam rose as he poured water through it. I file data, he said calmly. That doesn't mean I agree with all of it. Feels the same from the other side, Tira replied. He handed her the cup. She didn't take it at first. When the warmth reached her fingers, she accepted it slowly, like she was testing trust the way someone tests cold water before stepping in. Soft footsteps sounded behind them. Nira emerged from the couch, blanket wrapped around her shoulders like a cape. Her hair stood unevenly in every direction. She blinked against the light. Morning, she whispered. Close enough, Jalen said. Nira sniffed toward the counter. Is that coffee? Something like it. Jalen set out dried grain mix from the cold unit. As he cooked, the smell of warm food filled the apartment again. Salt, heat, and a hint of pepper. Nira drifted closer, drawn by the scent. Tira watched him in silence. Her arms remained crossed, but her posture softened by a fraction. After a few minutes, Jalen placed 2 plates on the table. Nirax sat immediately, excitement flickering in her tired eyes. Tira hesitated again, but only for a moment this time. The quiet that followed wasn't awkward. It was necessary. It was the kind of silence that happens when people eat real food after too many empty days. When they finished, Jalen leaned back in his chair. "You'll need identification," he said. Tira stiffened. "For what?" "To stay off the registry's radar. If they notice 2 missing entries from that trade stall, they'll look for you. I need to move your names into a safe category." Nira's voice trembled. "Will they come here?" "Not if I do it right," Jalen said. "Registry checks are slow, overworked, underpaid. Half of them don't even check movement logs anymore." Tira tilted her head. "And what will we be on paper?" "Temporary residents under my supervision," he replied. "A formality. No one looks deeper." She studied him. "You're lying for us." "I'm adjusting the system," he said. "It's different." "Is it?" she pressed. He didn't respond. Instead, he opened a storage drawer and pulled out folded clothes, plain gray tunics, clean but old. He handed them over. "These will keep you warm. They're not perfect, but they're better than what you have." Nirax touched the fabric with small, cautious hands. "Thank you." Tira held the tunic without putting it on. Her eyes narrowed. "Why do you keep spare clothes?" "Inspection work," he said. "Sometimes I find people who need them." "People like us?" she asked. "No," he said quietly. "People the system forgot." The room fell silent again. Nirax slipped into the washroom to change. Tira remained standing, clothes in hand. "You act like you owe us something," she said softly. Jalen shook his head. "I owe the world a little kindness." "That's enough." Tira didn't answer, but something in her expression shifted. The hard edge in her eyes softened, just for a heartbeat. Moments later, Nirax returned in the gray tunic. It hung loosely, but it fit well enough. She looked younger, safer. Jalen put on his coat, fastening the collar. "I need to go to the lower registry terminal. I'll be gone a few hours." Nira's face tightened. "You're leaving us here?" "It's safer than taking you with me," he said. "Keep the door locked. Don't open it for anyone." Tira stepped forward. "And if someone comes?" "They won't," he said firmly. "But if they do," she insisted. "Stay quiet. Don't panic. Panic draws attention." Tira held his gaze. "You've done this before." "Too many times," he replied. He reached for the door, paused, and looked back at them. He reached for the door, paused, and looked back at them. "I'll return before midday." And with that, he stepped into the hallway, leaving the 2 sisters in the silence of his small apartment. 2 women caught between fear and hope, waiting for a man they barely knew but had already begun to trust more than they expected. The apartment stayed unervingly quiet after Jalen left. The hum of the old window panel and the distant throb of the station's engines were the only sounds filling the space. Tira stood near the door for several minutes, listening for footsteps, listening for trouble. Nirax sat on the couch, hugging the blanket around herself as if it were armor. "He said he'll come back," Nirax whispered. Tira didn't answer. She walked to the window instead. The glass was cold under her fingers. The view outside was a blur of metal walkways, rails, and hanging wires. Life continued as though the world never noticed anyone missing. "They always say they'll come back," Tira murmured. But she didn't sound angry, just tired. Minutes passed slowly. Nirax reheated the leftover grain mix, stirring it the way she had watched Jalen do. Tira paced the room more times than she could count. Every sound from the hallway made her freeze. By late morning, tension filled the room like another presence. Then, finally, the door lock clicked. Tira stepped in front of Nirax without thinking, her body already ready to shield her. The door slid open. Jalen stepped in, coat damp with the cold outside air, and a small paper bag in his hand. "Smelled the reheated pepper from halfway down the hall," he said calmly. Nirax let out a rush of relief. Tira didn't speak, but her shoulders fell by a fraction. "You came back," Nirax whispered. "I said I would," Jalen replied, hanging his coat on the hook. "If I wanted to disappear, trust me, you wouldn't smell my cooking in the hall." He tried to joke. It wasn't a good one, but it eased something small inside the room. Tira studied his face as he unpacked the paper bag, 2 ration packs, a container of fresh greens, and a sealed pouch of meat strips. "You look tired," she said plainly. "Registry lines are longer than usual," he muttered. "Everyone's trying to fix problems they caused themselves." He washed his hands and began preparing food again. The rhythmic sound of chopping filled the kitchen area. Nira drifted closer, drawn by the familiar calmness of the routine. "What did you do at the registry?" Tira asked. Jalen kept slicing, but his voice lowered. "I moved your names into a temporary care unit. On paper, you're both registered workers assigned to me for upper-tier maintenance. It's a normal category. No one questions it." Nira blinked. "So, we're invisible." "You're boring," Jalen corrected. "And boring is safer." For a moment, both sisters were silent. Then Tira asked, "And if someone checks our old records?" Jalen's hands paused. "They won't." "You sound certain." "I'm not," he admitted. "But I'm careful." He finished cooking and placed the plates on the table. Today's meal smelled richer, something warm and sweet mixed with crisp meat and soft grain. Nira sat immediately, already smiling before taking the first bite. Tira sat slower, still analyzing him even as hunger tugged at her. Halfway through the meal, Jalen said, "I need your help tonight." Both sisters looked up at the same time. "The lower maintenance unit is failing again," he explained. "If the pumps shut down, the entire floor freezes. And if the floor freezes, this place becomes dangerous for all of us. We help you fix it." Nira asked. "Sort of," he said. "I need extra hands to move scrap and clear the path. Nothing heavy." Tira narrowed her eyes. "Why after dark? Less traffic. Fewer eyes. You think someone's watching us?" Jalen didn't answer at first. Then he said quietly, "I think someone always watches something." A chill moved through the room. Not from fear, but from the truth in his tone. Tira slowly set down her spoon. "And you still want us with you?" "Want isn't the word," he said. "But you need to learn the station's layout if you plan to survive here. I won't always be around." Nira swallowed hard. "We just got here, and you're already talking about leaving." Jalen looked at her gently. "I didn't say I'm leaving. I said I won't be around forever." Tira stood, folding her arms again. "Then teach us what we need to know." There was no fear in her voice this time. Only resolve. Jalen nodded once. "We leave after sunset." He began packing tools into his worn canvas bag, spare filters, sealant cartridges, a small light, and a manual driver. Every item had a place. Every move had a purpose. Nira watched him with growing confidence. Tira watched him with growing understanding. Night was coming, and with it, another step into the unknown. But now they were stepping into it together. Night arrived slowly on Vorn Station. The upper lights dimmed from white to a dull blue, and the air turned colder as energy was redirected to the transit lanes. When the hallway outside fell quiet enough that every footstep echoed, Jalen finally opened the door. "Stay close," he said. Tira and Nira stepped out with their gray tunics and borrowed work shoes. The corridor was darker than before, pipes dripping steadily, leaving thin trails on the metal floor. The sisters stayed behind Jalen, their shadows blending with the flickering light as they walked. Nira whispered, "Why does it feel colder at night?" "Because the station saves power," Jalen replied. "It keeps the rich decks warm and lets the lower ones freeze." "So nothing changes," Tira muttered. Jalen didn't argue. Some truths didn't need words. They reached an old maintenance hatch at the end of the hall. The control panel flickered weakly when Jalen keyed his access code. The lock clicked, and the door opened with a groan like something waking from sleep. A wave of stale air hit them, cold, damp, heavy. Nira wrinkled her nose. "Smells like old metal." "That's because it is," Jalen said. "Stay careful. Some things down here still have power." He switched on a handheld light. Shadows stretched across the narrow space. Pipes along the walls, loose wiring, puddles shining like broken mirrors. Tira stepped inside slowly, eyes scanning every corner. Nira followed, clutching Jalen's coat around herself. "Don't touch cables," Jalen warned. "Some of them bite." He knelt beside a large valve block and pried open the metal cover. Sparks flickered once in the darkness. Jalen muttered something under his breath, half frustration, half habit. "What do you need us to do?" Tira asked. "Sort anything not attached," he replied. "Pipes, crates, scrap. Make piles, clean, salvage, or throw away." "You expect us to know which is which?" she said. "Use your eyes," he answered. "If it doesn't look broken, it's salvage." Tira raised an eyebrow, but got to work. She moved with surprising skill, lifting pieces of old tubing, tapping valves, checking labels. Nira copied her sister, though more carefully, picking things up like they might explode. Jalen kept working on the valve. His hands moved fast and precise, twisting bolts, adjusting pressure, resetting a line that was moments from bursting. He worked like someone who had done this too many times for too many people. Suddenly, a metallic clang echoed through the chamber. Nira gasped and jumped back. A loose pipe had slipped from a high bracket and slammed into the floor. Tira spun toward the sound, pulling Nira behind her. Jalen was there in 2 steps. He grabbed the pipe before it rolled, lifted it out of the way, and checked the ceiling bracket. Loose fittings, he muttered. This place is held together with hope and old welds. Nira's eyes were wide. Do things fall often? Only when the station wants to remind us we're too small, he said. Tira exhaled slowly. You move fast for someone who claims he's tired of life. I never said tired, Jalen replied. I said careful. He stepped back to the main valve and pulled a lever. The pipes shuddered. A deep hum filled the room as water began flowing again. The stale air shifted and the cold eased slightly. That's the pump, Jalen said. It's awake. Nira smiled. So we helped. You didn't break anything, he said. That's good enough for a first night. Tira gave a faint smirk. They packed up, stacking tools back into Jalen's canvas bag. When they stepped out of the chamber, the hallway felt warmer, not because of the pump, but because they had left the darkness behind. What happens now? Nira asked. We go upstairs, Jalen said. Rest. And tomorrow, you learn the next part. Tira frowned. There's more. There's always more, he said. They walked back through the endless blue-lit corridor, their footsteps soft, their breaths visible in the cold air. The sisters followed closer than before, not out of fear, but because the path didn't feel as frightening anymore. When they reached the lift, Nira looked up at Jalen. You said you won't always be around, she whispered. When will you leave? Jalen didn't answer immediately. Then, quietly, he said, I haven't decided. The lift doors closed around them, sealing the 3 inside a small circle of pale light. Not strangers. Not yet family. Something in between, something fragile but growing. A connection neither the station nor the system had planned for. The lift doors opened to the dim hallway outside Jalen's apartment. The lights flickered, casting shaky shadows across the metal floor. Tira stepped out first, scanning both ends of the corridor before moving. Nira followed close behind, her small hands gripping Jalen's coat for warmth. Jalen locked the door behind them once they entered the apartment. The quiet inside felt different this time. Not fearful, not tense, but full of something new. Something unspoken. Tira removed her work shoes, placing them near the wall. Nira dropped onto the couch, exhausted but proud. It was the first time in months she had done anything that felt like real work. Useful work. Human work. Jalen set his tool bag down and rolled his shoulders. You both handled yourselves well. Nira smiled instantly. Tira didn't smile, but something in her posture loosened, respect slowly replacing suspicion. He cooked a small meal, nothing fancy, grain mash, warm broth, a few slices of preserved meat. They ate together. This time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was comfortable. After they finished, Jalen leaned against the counter, arms crossed. There's something I need to tell you, he said. Tira's eyes sharpened. Nira tensed. Both waited. I checked your trade records today, Jalen continued. Your names weren't just listed in the vendor logs. They were flagged. Someone requested updates on your status 2 weeks ago. Tira's voice lowered. Someone is looking for us. Yes. Nira's breathing grew shallow. Who? Another vendor? No, Jalen said. Someone higher. Someone with clearance. A cold ripple moved through the room. Tira stood. So we aren't safe. Jalen shook his head. You're safer than before. But not invisible. Tira paced the room slowly. Her mind moved fast, faster than Jalen expected. We should leave the station. But Jalen replied quickly. If you leave now, they'll track you before you reach the outer docks. Running only helps them. Nira hugged her blanket tighter. Then what do we do? Jalen hesitated, something he rarely did. I can remove your old tags permanently, he said. Wipe you from the registry. Make you free citizens. Tira stared at him. That's illegal. Many things worth doing are, he said softly. You'll lose your job, she whispered. Jalen nodded. Probably. And your home. Maybe. And your safety. He gave a faint smile. I lost that years ago. Silence filled the small apartment. Nira finally spoke, her voice trembling. Why would you do that for us? Jalen's answer came quietly, steady, honest. Because the system broke you. And I refuse to be part of the machine that keeps breaking people. Tira stopped pacing. Her expression shifted. Not fear, not suspicion, something heavier. Then what happens after? She asked. You'll choose where to go? Who to be? What life to live? No more markets. No more stalls. No more fear. Nira's eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. And you? Jalen looked toward the window. Rain had begun again, sliding down the glass like thin silver scars. I'll figure it out, he said. Tira stepped closer. Why not come with us? He blinked, surprised. You don't need me. She shook her head. Needing someone isn't weakness. Trusting someone isn't either. Nira nodded. You saved us, but you're alone. We don't want to leave you alone. For the first time since they met, Jalen didn't have a practiced answer. The room stayed quiet, waiting for his decision. He walked to the shelf, lifted his old registry badge, stared at it for a long moment. The metal was scratched, edges worn, emblem faded. A symbol of rules he no longer believed in. Then he set it down, deliberately, finally letting go. We leave tomorrow, he said. All three of us. Tira inhaled sharply. Nira's whole face lit up. Jalen continued. But we don't run. We move carefully, quietly, step by step. And when we reach the docks, I'll get you new IDs. Real ones. Ones that belong to you, not the registry. Tira approached him, stopping just a foot away. You're sure? She asked. For the first time in a long time, he said, yes. Outside, thunder rumbled through the station walls. Inside, the three of them stood together, no longer strangers bound by fear, but a small, determined group choosing their own future. The world outside was dangerous. The system was broken. The path ahead uncertain. But they were ready. Together,